So welcome everyone to this first evolutionary discussion, and today we're going to be talking about trauma, healing and conflict resolution. And today on the call we have Paul Terrell, who's very kindly agreed to do an opening alignment. So I'm going to hand over to you, Paul, just to do a couple of minutes just to get us into an alignment before we come to Juliet Yelverton, who is going to just set the scene on trauma healing. So over to you, Paul.
Well, thank you, Rachel, and enormous gratitude for you and your team at Source for creating this forum. And so our prayers today, of course, very much might be with the people at Standing Rock and this extraordinary pivotal event. And it's very relevant to today's discussion, conflict resolution and trauma. So here we are on a very important day. And so our prayers can be for these words that come from our mouths today be guided by divine consciousness, by love and truth, and that the effects of this discussion today hopefully can be of service in this work. So really that's our prayer to bring more light through this discussion into the world and to inspire people all over the planet in this work of creating a world of peace and human rights and ecological renewal. And so maybe.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Juliet Yelverton, and my mission in life is to heal the trauma on the planet. I run trainings for practitioners to provide them with trauma healing skills, and I've established a healing retreat centre, Healing Water Sanctuary in Glastonbury. I'm also the director of ACE, Avalon Community Energy, with a commitment to put in safe renewable energy sources in the community, which is community backed and financed. And I'm very greatly relieved to see that there's actually been a halt on the Dakota Access Pipeline. I've been following it really, really closely. This pipeline is the potential for more trauma on the planet. And from my viewpoint as a trauma healer, what I see at the moment is that our whole planet is spiraling down into what's called the trauma spiral. And that as we get progressively more traumatized, our capacity for ending conflict and having a fair, just and peaceful planet diminishes. Basically, every single person on this planet I see as having some degree of trauma or other. And by trauma, I mean that the nervous system is dysfunctional, that it's been dysregulated. So without going into a lot of theory and depth here, because this isn't the place for it, it can be seen on my other videos and things that I've written and so on. But whenever we're subjected to any of these situations, such as poverty, war, famine, abuse, violence, rape, and so on, that our nervous system gets damaged. And unless we heal that trauma that's being carried in our nervous system, then we have the potential to be living in a very limited and very highly activated state of easily jumping into anger or depression or very serious chronic illnesses all arise out of this. So I can see that many of our major chronic illnesses has its roots in trauma, amongst other things. So this is a complex issue because we're talking not only about trauma, but we're talking about politics, We're talking about nutrition. We're talking about corporations. There's a lot going on here. So in this small conversation, it's hard. And for us,
Juliet, I'm going to be provocative here. In the sense of manifestation and what we are manifesting, this whole kind of drama triangle of persecutor, victim, rescuer is essentially trauma playing out, in that it manifests itself over and over again. And my sense with what went on with the Dakota pipeline is a kind of activation of a very deep healing that is needed with the indigenous people in America, that this constant persecutor, victim, rescuer triangle playing itself out, because the original kind of wound of that original invasion has not yet been healed.
That once we're traumatized, we do not have the capacity to heal very easily without really focused work. And that once we're traumatized, the psyche is continually bringing up situations whereby we can have another go at healing the trauma. So an abused child will tend to get into a relationship with an abusive partner. You know, everybody, not just the Native Americans, but everybody involved in this conflict is involved in some way with this replaying of trauma, and we're all doing it. And until we become conscious as a planet of how this works, then this is going to keep playing out in many different ways.
And this is exactly the discussion, isn't it? How do we collapse that trauma? How does it heal? How do we heal it at a planetary level?
Well, I'm not sure. Education is really important, and one-to-one healing is obviously important, because as each one of us heals, then our own nervous system, our own healed nervous system, can entrain and calm the nervous system of another person. So one thing is that all of us on the planet needs to stop witnessing violence and to stop talking about violence, because when we're watching it on Facebook or somewhere else, we're now getting re-traumatized.
I'm Richard Ashworth, I'm a feng shui man. The Book of Changes says that violence will always breed violence. So when we have trauma, I hear what you said, that's a very interesting take. Take is not even fair, a brilliant analysis that trauma is repeated in order to heal the trauma, to take it to the point where it couldn't be been healed last time. It instantly go back, have it healed again like it wasn't last time, and so on and so on and so on and so on. Boris Johnson, actually, of all authorities, was on TV yesterday talking about how in Syria they are sowing the dragon seeds of violence. I mean, he's referring to Jason and the Argonauts in his usual arcane kind of way. But there is no alternative, if you will, to violence but further violence. The solution is forgiveness. Now, the solution, whether we're talking about individually or whether we're talking globally, is forgiveness. And forgiveness is a much understood topic, because people think of forgiveness as being magnanimous in the face of other people's crap behavior. That's called blame.
Richard, just to touch on that point, and I welcome other people to come on. In terms of forgiveness, are you talking about sort of me forgiving you, or are you talking about Ho'oponopono, where I essentially take responsibility for everything that manifests, ask forgiveness from the other person because I recognize that I've manifested the situation? Because it's a subtle difference, isn't it?
It has to. It's interesting that you were breaking up and echoing and stuff. As you and I both know, when this gets to real emotional stuff, the electronics go weird. So we're obviously doing something useful. The answer, insofar as I know, and I haven't ascended, so please, hear me. I'm as lost as everyone. But it is a question of the way that we do it. When we forgive intellectually, we leave hooks in. When we forgive here, if you can see me here, when we just let go and move forward, there is real forgiveness. Everything is over. I mean, there are authorities on this, are people like Viktor Frankl, for instance, who did not, I mean, if you understand about the Jewish trauma, I mean, it's why I'm always banging on about people, reading a couple of books and reading papers that fold. People think that the Holocaust, that the guilt of these people who left, who died afterwards, killed themselves, like Borowski, is because of the terrible treatment they had at the hands of the Nazis. No. As you know, my son's an authority on the Holocaust. If you understand it, the guilt is of what they did to survive. And it is kind of like an illustration of what forgiveness is. Because actually, those guys, Primo Levi, these guys who really live with that trauma, the trauma was not what was done to them, it was what they did. And that is exactly what we're dealing with.
I would say that forgiveness is very important, but it's something that comes later on in the last stage of trauma healing, that when you're very highly traumatized, you do not have the capacity to be thinking like that, because the access to the frontal cortex, the brain, is not available because the degree of adrenaline flowing in the body.
Well, I think I hear the authority in that, but I think that the balance between physical models and absolute responsibility is something that each of us has to find. Because there is a point where we can just say, sod it, I forgive. And I hear the value of what you're saying, but we do have that capacity. We don't have to follow steps. At any given moment, we can say, right, that's it, done. And the state of the world at the moment requires that delicate balance, which is we don't get stuck into models, we don't get stuck into shtick.
I think what Juliet's saying, though, Richard, is that a lot of unevolved people, shall we say, who haven't done the spiritual work, who haven't got that consciousness, are operating from essentially the id, is kind of what you're saying, Juliet.
I'm saying that if we're not healed sufficiently, we don't physically have the access to be doing the process of forgiveness. But I just want to comment also that what's been suggested here is forgiveness. All healing has to start with ourselves. It's very easy for us to talk about how someone else isn't healed, but we can only be doing it for ourselves. And in that is the example and the help for another person to heal. So yes, let's work, all of us, with forgiveness for ourselves for the horrors that we're witnessing around us.
Said there is this individual healing that we all need to do, because we're living in a culture that encourages us to live in panic, getting to work, finding enough money for the mortgage, rushing here and there, being blasted with television and information. And this is because it's kind of normal. We think that's normal for a human being. But for hundreds of thousands of years of development of primates, it's not normal at all. They're very, very short moments of tension. And if you look at the animals grazing, they graze peacefully with listening. And then when they smell or hear a tiger, or it'll be a lion, Africa, then at that moment, tension comes, great attention, and a short moment of running, and then back to deep relaxation. So I think that's, the first step is to look on the individual level. Yes, we're all traumatized, and some of us have deep traumas and some of us don't. And then on the collective level is, do we need to be completely healed? Do we need to be enlightened beings to do the work together to resolve conflicts? And there, I think the answer is no. We're human beings. We're faulty human beings. We've all got a limp somewhere. But that doesn't stop us sitting in a circle and listening and using these tools that we've been gifted by the native peoples, that are very deep and powerful tools, in order to resolve conflicts through, we have in the West, we have nonviolent communication, Marshall Rosenberg's great gift. But already there's thousands of years of deep knowledge that goes extremely deep, not just the circle sitting and listening, but many, many tools within the circle. Well, here we see 300 tribes dropping their differences in order to stand united. This is an amazing, extraordinary event of the success And in a way, you could say it's unfortunate that you need a common enemy to bring people together. And then the next step is that we don't need a common enemy. We just need a common belief, a common symbol to bring us all together to do this work. And here the natives are leading the way and showing us how it's done. So we do have tools. We have the circle. We have nonviolent communication, and we have many other tools. And we don't, in my view, need to be completely healed as individuals. We can also get healing in this work.
But what you said was absolutely brilliant. We, at this moment in our evolution, we appear to require a common enemy in order to achieve excellence. That appears to be the state at which human beings are at. It is almost, if the enemy, it's almost like things like AIDS and Ebola are there to allow us to all cooperate, because none of us would agree. We would all agree that is not, that we don't want it.
Finding a vision that we can all share, because it's not a divisive vision. It isn't divisive on any grounds of religion or race or belief in any way.
And interesting, it makes Donald Trump, in his way, the dark before the light. Because if we were going on being selfish and being liberal in a kind of half-baked kind of a way, someone who is completely a total turkey is a real supportive figure. Because everyone can go, what an idiot. Everybody in the world is going, what a total fool.
And one of the things that I was shown actually when I went to Peru and in medicine was that the absolute gift in Donald Trump of this extreme yang, unevolved masculine, old paradigm business kind of scarcity competitive model is that it opened this polarity for the divine feminine, the evolved feminine. I don't mean women, I mean the evolved feminine to come through, and in that polarity, and that was his gift. It's quite interesting, and so in that sense we can love Donald Trump because he's opened this opportunity for something different to shine.
Yes, yeah, but we can love him without approving. This is what we were talking about. It is so very hard. One of the hardest things that we can do is to mark the card of people that we love realistically, and to mark the card of people that we despise unrealistically. Yeah, or equally realistically, but positively. I was reading Dave Eggers in The Guardian on Saturday. He's the best man on American politics, Dave Eggers in The Guardian. And he was saying that if what Trump does is to recreate the American infrastructure, he'd probably have a majority. And that's absolutely right. Politically, right down here in the physical stuff, it's absolutely right. I mean, it's hugely unlikely, by the way. But the important thing, I mean, you're talking about something more profound, of course, but the important thing is to mark his card, to see him for who he is. And what I say is based on my upbringing and my prejudices and so on and so forth. So it is necessarily subjective and necessarily at least subtly different from yours. But to see who he is, in the sense as objective as I can be, and meanwhile get what you're saying, which is this is some kind of a blessing.
I hope it would be fair to say that most of the trauma on this planet to Mother Earth and between peoples with wars and chemical destruction and so on is pretty much done by men. For several thousand years, the men seem to have taken over, for whatever reason, the decision-making process. And that, in a way, the men are responsible for many of the traumas. And so we're living on a female planet. Mother Earth, this is not a male planet, essentially. It's about nourishment and growth and development. And there are dead planets, which are very male, like Mars. But that I think a large part of the trauma healing is to for the men to see their position as the servants, if you like, of the goddess, and that the healing will come through the nourishment of the female. Now that can be the female within the men as well. I'm not saying that way, but through the female element of nourishment and caring. and that this the women on the whole resolve conflicts much better than men, because our background as primates, the men, our genetic background is less nourishing and more confrontational, although we have this also capacity for deep love and care. So I would just like to bring that in, that I think part of it is clearly for the men to step back and allow the women to dream the future, and to for the men to support the visions of the women, because the visions of the men have been manifest on this planet. And what do we get? We get tall buildings that look like penises, and we get destruction of the environment, and we get wars. So I think it's time for the visions of the women to be supported by the men.
We have to mark Trump's card in that two of the major targets here are Wade versus Roe and contraception. Because, you know, on Saturday I was saying the most important issue in the world, how Western women will save the world, is through the education of women. And I don't know whether you feel the same, Paul, but I feel like I'm patronizing when I even say that. It's such an offensive thing to say. But as women become more educated, you saw how this issue was so emotive in Nigeria, for instance, because those guys know that educated young women have a contribution to make beyond having babies. Wade versus Roe, which is abortion on demand, and the contraceptive pill are probably the most important leaps of evolution in the 20th century. And by the way, I'm not necessarily endorsing any of this morally, but the result is that woman is being put in a position which biology has deprived her of for the last several thousand years, in that a woman was basically either a sex goddess or a crone, because a sexually active woman had 40 years of pregnancy followed by death if she didn't die in the middle. And that is changing. And we have to be very, very aware that this family values, the whole, you know, traditional common sense Bible Belt rubbish. The really important stuff is the stuff that will put women back in the bloody nursery. It is so important.
Richard, I loved what you said on Saturday, that we are entering this 20-year period of the 9 energy, where the mother energy, the feminine energy, is coming back into its power. So it's like there's a cosmic wind behind the feminine energy coming in. I said this to you this morning, that traditionally the fire rooster year next year is all traditionally about revolution and upheaval. And I'm thinking with women in the driving seat, it could be about ascension and evolution.
To explain what Rachel was talking about, I was talking about the way that Chinese measure time, and they break. There is a cycle of 60, the idea being that there are only 60 different years, there are only 60 different days, 60 different months, 60 different hours. Elaboration on that is for another time. And they package these periods of 60 into threes of 180. So the view in Chinese metaphysics is that we are currently in a 180-year cycle that started at the winter solstice 1863, which is just after the Gettysburg Address, that you might call the American cycle, that wears out in 2044, when we probably go into the Chinese cycle. However, these are broken down into chunks of approximately 20 years. The one we're currently in is called the 8th, and the next one is the 9th, which is the final one. The year we're about to enter, we just left, is a 2-year, which is about woman. The 2 has not been what is called timely, that is fortunate, that is lucky, that is useful in a positive way within the feng shui remit for about 100 years. It has not been that kind of consciousness that men have stifled. And I'm very aware that you and I are monopolizing this conversation as well. I would like to shut up in a minute, but thousands of years have passed since women were free to bring that kind of consciousness to bear, as you have said very eloquently. But it looks like the 2, for technical reasons, has been considered a negative number, whether identified in time or space, if you follow me. And as we move into the 9th cycle, it becomes just a little bit ahead. And because it's just a little bit ahead, feng shui masters all over the Chinese diaspora are treating the two, that is the woman, that is sharing, that is dividing, that is relationship, I mean giving away, generosity, as having positive power for at least the first time in 100 years, and in some senses, the first time in several thousand. So that's what Rachel wanted me to explain.
Hi, my name is Ruqayya, and my personal mission is to help women redefine and reclaim what it means to be a woman in the 21st century, because it's an evolving process to me, the feminine. I think we've got grasp of where we are evolving, but what I want to talk about was the fact that I don't know whether anybody saw that film recently, and it was
Arrival.
The Arrival. That's it.
Wonderful movie, yeah.
Yes. But what I learned from that is about the word communication, and that there was they arrived 12 little pods all around the world, and their mission, these little 12 pods, from what I understand, was to get us to communicate. And initially, when you look at the dynamics of communication and language, which is predominantly feminine, in my personal opinion, how we express, how we, educate, how we communicate our desires and our feelings, is very much a feminine way of doing so. Emotionally communicating, emotionally feeling into a situation, is that we had to work out how these 12 pods were going to communicate with all of us, and they did it all through symbolisms. And I just took on the thing that when we were felt threatened, it's a weapon, communication goes into back off. So when it comes to about conflict resolution, if we feel threatened or we feel judged or we go into that fear, we back off. And what I believe women are very good at, is keep that conversation going, keep the negotiation part of things going, keep the energy in more flow, and be aware more of the feelings of the other person. So when we're in conflict resolution, we're dealing with it on a kind of like intuitive way.
But one thing I just want to pick up on that you said there, and it actually came through to me in one of my journeys when in Peru, is this idea of judgment. Because when we see everything as a gift, even our demons, and I was taught, our demons are our greatest allies, because we go into judgment of stuff, of what we think is good, what we think is bad, and so we welcome the good stuff and we fight the bad stuff. And when we allow those demons that are coming up in our awareness, and we allow them and we surrender to them, and we say, what are you here to teach me? What are you here to show me that I need to heal because I'm out of alignment? Then they can become our greatest allies. And so that thing you said about in the film, where they took a decision that they made a judgment that this is bad, and they wanted to get rid of it, that was when the problem started in the movie. Whereas the feminine way is much more about surrender. Why have you shown up in my awareness? What are you here to teach me? How have I attracted this? And this goes back to Ho'oponopono. What is it in my energy field that has manifested this conflict, and how can I transmute it and transcend it? And ultimately, what's the teaching? What's the healing?
Yeah.
And in that,
yes, I just want to comment on women being empowered, that this is very important, and it's not so much that women need to be empowered, but we all need to be empowered in the feminine, into the caring way of being, and not into the abusive ways of being in power over structures. So traditionally, the women have had, if you go back to the matriarchal ways of culture, women were working together and not power over. It was power between. And this is what the Native Americans are showing us now. That the key to trauma healing is nourishment and resource. It's like when we are not in fear, and we're not in a belief about scarcity and attack, and we're sitting in the position that we are nourished, and we have the capacity to nourish ourselves, and we don't believe in scarcity, that there's plenty for me, and we can create a container of safety, then we can heal trauma. And in terms of conflict resolution, when we're in a situation where we're trying to resolve something, if we're feeling activated and triggered by what's going on with the other person, we can't do it. But if we create within that conflict resolution situation a feeling of safety and well-being, then there is then the capacity and the possibility of resolving the problems.
Sure. So we can move out of fear and into faith, essentially.
Absolutely, into safety and well-being. Yeah.
The female aspect, the feeling aspect, the intuitive aspect being so important, and it brought up everything that I know about non-violent communication, where we have this in the West, this fabulous tool where we, in a very simple form, Marshall Rosenberg says there's four stages. One is identifying what the actual fact is. Somebody said something disrespectful. My feeling, and that's the first thing to go to, is I'm angry and I'm sad, I might even be frightened. And then my need, and going to my need for respect. And then communicating in a non-aggressive way, making a request, not a demand, not blackmailing, but requesting. But this focus on unless we can identify our feelings and go straight to what are my needs, there will be conflict. And here we have this extraordinary tool, which I am so surprised is not better known than it is after so many years since the book Nonviolent Communication was written, and there are a great number of practitioners in spreading it. But here we already have our own Western tool, which I think is an extraordinary, wonderful thing, and it incorporates the getting in touch with our own feelings so that we own our feelings and take responsibility for our own needs, and then we can use as empathy into feeling into what are other people's needs and feelings. Of course they're angry, of course they're aggressive, because they have needs that are not met. And what Juliet was saying about how we can't come to forgiveness until we understand and empathize with the person who has abused us or caused us harm. And so I just wanted to wave the flag for nonviolent communication, because it is such a great tool that we can incorporate very easily in all our work.
And Paul, just to pick up on what you said earlier about the feminine, because this is a very important point, that it isn't about male, female, it is about feminine, because we've been, you know, there's a lot of talk about, wow, we've got a woman Prime Minister, Theresa May, and then obviously Hillary Clinton was positioning herself to become first woman president, and all of these women are not necessarily, you know, drawing on their feminine energy. And I certainly know, as a woman in business and part of that patriarchy, how easy it is to go into your masculine, to draw on your masculine energy to be a success and to win, especially if you're having to kind of go up in a patriarchal situation to get power, for example.
It's one of the big issues, and the women have come very far because they've you've had to fight for everything you've got. The men can be lazy because we already got it. We can put our feet up and be served. And so why would we want to change anything? We've got it so good. So the big burden, in a way, is on the women to step into their full power. So yes, on every level. How many political parties in Britain are led by women at the moment? Most of them. This is a really incredible movement. It took one woman, I know it's a movement, but nevertheless, one woman in India managed to ban Monsanto from India. Of course, it wasn't just for one woman, she had a movement, but nevertheless, it's the women leading extraordinary revolutionary events on this planet. And so I think it is a big issue in healing the traumas and resolving the conflicts, is that it will be done through the feminine in the men and through the feminine in the women. And this male, the male has its place, but taking too much place, the male has been destructive.
Well, I'm very touched by this opportunity to share and to speak with everybody here. And my wish is that we all see each other as we see ourselves and our need for tenderness and care and love, and that we extend that in everything that we do, and kindness in everything we do to everyone around us. And I really wish to see a healed planet, and those are my prayers. And thank you for everyone for being here. And yeah, sorry, I'm a bit lost for words in this moment.
No, that's wonderful. So thank you all so much for joining us, and it's been really fascinating to have all your contributions. And thank you, Kevin and Caroline. I know you didn't come on, but thank you for coming on and being part of it and sort of holding the space. So lots of love. Bye for now.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.